Check 1, 2. All right. So what we're going to do today, we're going to create an abstract shape and color portrait or self-portrait, ideally using a photograph that you've taken under the track lighting so that you have some decent amount of contrast. That'll make this job a little bit easier. So what we want to do first is open Adobe Illustrator and make a new document. Letter size is the standard size that we use, but what we create in Illustrator is done using vector files, so those can be printed at a much larger size and you'll have no loss of resolution because the vector files can be infinitely resized. That's pretty convenient for us. So at a minimum we could print at letter size, but we could print it all the way up to a poster, and as long as we're printing from Illustrator it will end up looking nice and crisp. So we have to start with an image. This is an image I've already added, but I'm going to show you how to add the image again. So I'm going to go ahead and just hide this image layer. Okay. Now I'm going to go to File, Place. And when I go to Place, I'm going to browse for the image. I've got it saved to the desktop. You'll notice this image is actually a horizontal or landscape image. It's going side to side rather than up and down. But when I click it, I'm going to resize it because it came in massive. So I'm going to hold the Shift key and just kind of drag this corner down and recenter myself, and click and drag with Shift and recenter myself. Now we're holding Shift so that we can avoid distorting the picture. Okay, I'll go ahead and close these little extraneous windows here. And what I want you to do is make it a big enough file to fill the canvas. So you may have to hit Control- a couple of times to zoom out. And what I'm going to do is try to get the part that I want to work with. It is a portrait, so I'm not really interested in what's going on in the background so much as the figure. So since the eyes are looking over to this side, I'm going to leave a little air in the picture over to this side. And then I'm going to crop the image. When I press the crop button, it's going to give me a little indicator message. It says cropping the image embeds the file. The original file is not affected. Well, that works out perfect for us. So go ahead and click OK. And then all you got to do is make this box match your canvas. And once you're done, it will basically hide the rest of the photo. So we can hit the Apply button up here on the top ribbon. And now we're ready to rock. So the next step in the handout tells us to lock that image down. So what we want to do is choose Lock. That's Control-2. But you can also just lock the entire layer. But check it out. If I have the layer unlocked, but I just have the picture selected and I press Control-2 or Object Lock Selection, you can see it adds a little padlock just to that image. Either one is fine, but I may in fact go ahead and lock the entire image and just call it Photo, because we have to start adding our shapes by making new layers. Now unfortunately Illustrator doesn't have a convenient way of making new layers with a shortcut. The only method I'm aware of is hitting this little plus button. So we're going to go ahead and make a new layer and call it Triangles. I'll make another new layer and call it Rectangles. Another new layer, Circles, and then a final layer called Biomorphic. Now, gotta spell it right. Morphic. Good. Okay, so these are three different styles of shape. Some are going to have hard edges, some are going to be more rounded, and the biomorphic is almost like a contour drawing. So we're going to use some different tools to create these. So maybe I'll just start with the biomorphic since that's the easiest. I'm going to make sure I'm on that layer, and I'm going to hit D to get my default fill and stroke, and I'm immediately getting rid of the fill. Okay, and also, you know me, I'm not a fan of black stroke weights when tracing because they're hard to see. So I'm going to go ahead and set up something like this, hot pink magenta or bright yellow, or something that will really stand out on the image. In fact, I think maybe a bright blue or a green will work best because my skin is a little red toned under the lights. So I'm going to hit N to get the pencil tool. And before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and double click the tool to just make sure that it's skewing a little bit more toward accurate. Fill new pencil strokes, that's not a bad idea. Keep selected, we don't need. Close paths, all of that is pretty helpful. Okay, so I don't know how many different lines I'm going to use to trace this, but I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. And with biomorphic, you're really just looking for shapes that are present. Any shapes, organic shapes. So you can trace the pupil, and maybe I'll go ahead and give a nod to that highlight. So I'm going to treat it almost like a blind contour drawing, and I'm going to go around and just kind of trace over all of the various areas that I see. This one is going to be your most detail oriented. Okay, so I'm going to go along and give a little bit of a hint to the grain of hair whenever it's present. But again, you don't have to do this all in one perfect go. But if you are able to trace without picking up your mouse, the longer you do it, I think the more energy each line will have. Okay. And if I want to add on to this anchor point, I believe I can just tack onto there. All right, let me zoom out a touch. I've got to trace the other eye, and I'm also kind of looking for where are the areas of light and dark. So if I see an area that's a little more shaded, I am going to treat that as a shape itself. You know, there's kind of a highlight along here. You don't have to do a pure trace. You can kind of look at it in terms of like overlapping areas of shape, and that's fine. You can also just go back and forth and use open lines. You don't have to have close shapes because we are not using anything with a fill color. We're using only strokes. So I'll go around here and kind of give a hint to the beard without trying to define each and every hair, because that is not what our intent is with this project. Okay, got a little kind of a swirly thing happening. I'll go ahead and make a hint to that. Okay, but then once I've kind of addressed the presence of the hair and outlined it, we're good. There you go. Got to grab a couple of these stragglers. The ear is a fun shape. Okay, it's a little rough. I'm going to do that, but try to be a little more accurate. Okay, so the only other thing I need to define are the clothing. So I'll go ahead and hit the shoulders, get that big swoop of the collar, come down again with a big swoop. That was terrible. There we go. All right, get up there, come on out and define the collar. And I'll go ahead and just get the far side of the shoulder. So that's all been done on the biomorphic level. The only thing I've forgotten is my other eye. So I'm going to hit Control plus a couple of times, zoom in, and I got to trace what's important in here. So there's kind of a dark shape out here. I'm going to go ahead and trace that, trace around the pupil, and trace the iris, and then I'll come around and get the rest of the eye, and maybe the little eye socket here. I'll trace that in. All right, so there's some other shapes I may have forgotten. This kind of shadowy shape along the side, I can define that. You can, you know, look for things that are standing out like the nostrils, which mine doesn't have a jagged line in it, but you know, however you want to do it, it's going to be fine. If you see, again, like the eye socket here, it's kind of a highlight hitting it, I can encircle the entirety of that eye, and that's okay. So let's hide this now and see what we've got. So these are our biomorphic shapes. What you can do with these shapes is apply different brushes to them. So if you hit the F5 key, it'll bring up your brush window. And what's fun about the brush window is there's all these libraries. So if you wanted to try artistic calligraphy, it'll give you like kind of a slanted line or a fat brush. If you go to the side-to-side arrows, after that pops up, you can open other libraries. There's arrows like this. Now that's pretty fat at one point, but if we go down to 0.75 or 0.25, maybe you like the look of having arrows at all those open endpoints. Not a bad thing. So I'm going to save my work in progress right now. It's just called Abstract Shape and Color. And I'm going to move on to one of the other layers I need to do. Let's look at triangles. Okay, so I'll turn my photo back on. I'm going to switch up my fill color, or my stroke color rather, choose something that'll stand out. For the triangles, I think it's best to use the pen tool. I'm going to hit P for the pen tool. All right. And I want to look for areas that are roughly triangular. All right, I see kind of a triangular shape in that dark part of my brow. Okay, that's not quite thick enough, so I'm going to use my selection tool to select that, pump it back up to 1. There we go. That's standing out a lot. So again, the pen tool. These are allowed to overlap. Okay. And see another kind of triangle out to here. It's definitely triangle happening here. So I'm doing these rough kind of all-encompassing shapes, kind of hint at what's going on in the image. And what's going to be fun about this is when you get to the point that you've created overlap, not just with the triangles themselves, but with all of the other shapes, it's going to add up to some pretty interesting results. So again, the eyes are really going to sell it. Ooh, that one didn't close. Let me go ahead and make sure I click on that. Okay, if there's anything that I need to define, I can go through and define it. All right, so I'm going to go over here. Okay, there's kind of a white shape happening here I want to hint at. Okay, top of the brow. And as long as you're closing your pen points, you won't really run into any trouble. Let's see. It's going to be a little tricky with the ears, but I'm going to do my best to define those. Right, and I see kind of a triangular shape happening here. All right, so when it comes to the mustache, I see kind of a triangle here, and I'm going to overlap a bunch of them. All right, some may go upward, some may go downward. And eventually, we'll start to build up what happens with the image. And the fun when you're done with this is going to be in combining and overlapping and putting maybe one in front of the other. If I select and make the thick triangles and combine them, and we haven't even gotten to the circles and rectangles yet. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here so that you have the general gist of how this is done, and then I'll have some separate videos on how you can approach the rectangles, the circles, and the triangles separately.